Chaka Khan names the 8 gay singers Prince dated in secret. What if everything you thought you knew about Prince was a lie? Behind the lace, the eyeliner, and the genius of Purple Rain was a secret life that only a handful of people ever glimpsed. And now, thanks to Chaka Khan, the truth is finally spilling out the names of 8 gay singers Prince was rumored to have dated in secret. These revelations don't just challenge his carefully crafted image, they completely rewrite the history of one of music's greatest icons. Stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and join us as we uncover the secrets Prince never wanted told. Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan has always been known as the Queen of Funk, a powerhouse whose voice could cut through any arrangement and electrify any audience. But her role in Prince's story went far beyond music. She was not one of his lovers, nor a casual collaborator, but something far more important, a witness to the secret side of his life that the world never fully saw. When she revealed that Prince had deep, often private relationships with 8 gay singers, Andre Simone, Michael Jackson, Rick James, Larry Graham, Morris Day, George Clinton, Tricky, and Billy Preston, it was not gossip. It was the voice of someone who had lived close enough to Prince to know his patterns, his obsessions, and his hunger for connections that defied conventional labels. Her entry into his orbit came in the early 1980s when Prince was conquering the charts with Purple Rain. At the time, he was isolated inside Paisley Park, a kingdom where power and paranoia blended. Chaka, already an established star with Rufus and later as a solo act, became a rare confidant. Their friendship was unusual for Prince's late-night phone calls that stretched for hours, spontaneous dinners where he shut down entire restaurants for privacy, and conversations that reached beyond music into spirituality and vulnerability. Prince respected few people enough to open up, but Chaka was one of them. She was also central to one of his greatest gifts to music. When she reimagined his song I Feel For You in 1984, adding Mella Mel's rap and Stevie Wonder's harmonica, she created a cultural milestone, the first mainstream hit to fuse rap with R&B. Behind the studio magic, though, there were deeper conversations about identity and freedom. Chaka later admitted that she and Prince were kindred spirits bound more by soul than romance. That spiritual closeness gave her a perspective few others had. She noticed how his bonds with male artists weren't casual. With Andre Simone, it was inseparable brotherhood that looked like love. With Michael Jackson, it was rivalry tinged with obsession. With Rick James, the jealousy was so personal it felt intimate. Larry Graham's influence resembled submission. Morris Day mirrored him on stage with provocative chemistry. George Clinton and Tricky tapped into his fluidity, while Billy Preston represented the possibility of being openly gay in an industry hostile to queerness. Chaka saw how these ties consumed Prince not as passing friendships, but as relationships that shaped his music and his identity. In the end, her revelations reframed Prince's legacy. They did not diminish his genius, they expanded it. They showed that his art was fueled not only by women and mystique, but also by men whose creative power matched his own. Chaka Khan's voice, the same voice that sang, "Tell Me Something Good," became the voice that told us something the world never wanted to believe, that Prince's greatest secrets were hidden in plain sight, written into the men who inspired him. Prince Rogers Nelson. Prince Rogers Nelson was more than a superstar. He was a cultural earthquake whose very existence unsettled boundaries of race, gender, and sexuality in American music. Yet for all his boldness on stage, the lace gloves, the eyeliner, the androgynous fashion, Prince was fiercely private about his personal life. He built an empire in Paisley Park, but that kingdom doubled as a fortress, keeping the world out while he cultivated an air of mystery. It was this silence that allowed rumors to bloom, whispers of secret relationships that fans could never prove but never forget. And when Chaka Khan named the 8 gay singers she believed Prince was romantically tied to, Andre Simone, Michael Jackson, Rick James, Larry Graham, Morris Day, George Clinton, Tricky, and Billy Preston, it forced people to look at the man behind the myth with new eyes. Prince's genius was never just musical. It was theatrical, psychological, and deeply personal. He understood that image could be more powerful than confession, and he crafted his persona accordingly. Throughout the 1980s, when masculinity in R&B often looked like Teddy Pendergrass's bravado or Rick James's raw funk sexuality, Prince offered something entirely different. He was sensual, but not defined by women flamboyant, yet never pinned down by labels. His lyrics slipped between genders. His fashion blurred the line between masculine and feminine, and his interviews left more questions than answers. Was it performance? Was it truth? The mystery was the point. Behind the curtain, however, those closest to him saw a different Prince, one who craved intensity in his connections, especially with male artists who reflected his own complexity. André Simone wasn't just a bassist. He was Prince's mirror from adolescence into superstardom. Michael Jackson wasn't just a rival, he was an obsession. Rick James wasn't only competition. He was a combustible force of jealousy and attraction. These relationships weren't random. They revealed Prince's pattern of gravitating toward men who challenged him, inspired him, or unsettled him in ways that women never could. Chaka Khan's testimony matters because she was one of the few who saw him in both worlds, the public genius and the private seeker. She recalled late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn where Prince wrestled with spiritual questions, loneliness, and the weight of fame. She noticed how his devotion to Larry Graham, his spiritual mentor, bordered on dependence. She watched how his stage chemistry with Morris Day went beyond choreography into something intimate and coded. Even when Prince kept the public guessing, his private life with these men was an open secret among those in his inner circle. When Prince died in April 2016, the mystery died with him. He left no public declarations about his sexuality, no clear evidence of the nature of those rumored romances. Yet the power of his legacy lies in that ambiguity. The 8 names Chaka Khan connected to him are not just about gossip. They are about the hidden currents that fueled his art. Prince lived as a man who refused to be defined. But the truth, as Chaka hinted, was that his most profound relationships may have been the very ones the world never dared to acknowledge. André Simon Anderson. Long before Prince became a global icon, there was André Simone, born André Simon Anderson, standing right beside him in the basements of Minneapolis. They were teenagers, then 2 restless dreamers obsessed with music, experimenting with drum machines and guitars when most of their peers were still hanging out at basketball courts. What made their bond extraordinary was not only their shared vision of creating a new sound, but the closeness that blurred the line between family friendship and something deeper. André was more than Prince's bassist. He was his childhood friend, roommate, co-architect of the Minneapolis sound, and if whispers are to be believed, his first great secret love. They wore matching outfits, finished each other's sentences, and lived under the same roof for years. Chaka Khan, who later described herself and Prince as kindred spirits, noticed how André held a different place in Prince's heart. It was as if Prince let André into the inner sanctum long before the rest of the world even knew his name. In those early days, it was André who introduced Prince to new rhythms, new arrangements, even his first guitar. Many of the musical skeletons that would later define Prince's catalog were sketched in those late-night jam sessions where André and Prince pushed each other to innovate. They didn't just collaborate, they existed in a kind of creative marriage. When Prince's career skyrocketed with For You and later Purple Rain, André's fingerprints were all over the sound even if his name wasn't. But success has a way of eroding intimacy. By the early 1980s, cracks began to show. Prince was branded a genius while André remained in the shadows. Resentment grew when Prince allegedly took André's musical ideas and reshaped them without giving proper credit. Still, their connection was so tight that fans and insiders couldn't help but wonder, was there something more than music tying them together? The secrecy only fueled speculation. They were rarely seen with girlfriends during those years, and the intensity of their bond looked to many like love hidden in plain sight. When André finally broke away to pursue his solo career, he released The Dance Electric, a song gifted to him by Prince. It was both a blessing and a reminder of their complicated relationship. Even in separation, Prince was still writing his story. Their fallout was painful, and for years they barely spoke. Yet in interviews, Andre would sometimes drop hints about their shared history, speaking with a mix of nostalgia and unfinished emotion. Chaka Khan's decision to include Andre Simone among the 8 gay singers linked to Prince was not surprising to those who knew their history. Whether their connection was romantic, platonic, or something in between, Andre was undeniably the first man who shaped Prince's emotional and creative world. Without him, the Minneapolis sound may never have existed, and Prince's career might have taken a very different path. In the larger narrative of Prince's secret relationships, Andre Simone represents the beginning, the boyhood friend turned shadow partner, the one who stood closest when the world was still far away. If Prince's story is a puzzle of genius and secrecy, Andre Simone is the piece that started it all. Michael Jackson. When people think of Prince and Michael Jackson, the first image is rivalry. Two musical titans of the 1980s, both redefining pop music in their own way, seemed destined to compete. Michael was the king of pop, mastering precision choreography and global stardom. Prince was the purple one, a raw, unpredictable genius who blurred every artistic boundary. Their competition was legendary: who would dominate the charts, who could outshine the other on stage, who was truly the future of music. Yet Chaka Khan's startling revelation that Michael was one of the 8 gay singers Prince secretly dated adds a haunting new layer to their relationship. The rivalry, when looked at closely, often felt too personal to be just about music. Prince openly mocked Michael at times, refusing to appear on We Are the World because he didn't want to stand in Michael's shadow. When offered the duet on Michael's Bad, Prince famously turned it down, saying, "That line, 'Your butt is mine.' Who's singing that to who?" It was a quip laced with more than just humor. It hinted at a discomfort that sounded strangely intimate. Was this rejection pure ego or something deeper behind the scenes? Whispers told of Michael reaching out, making phone calls that Prince ignored, and extending invitations that were declined. What looked like rivalry in the press began to resemble unrequited longing when examined through Chaka's lens. If there was a private connection, it was complicated, filled with admiration, jealousy, and perhaps even attraction. The most telling moment came not during their careers, but after Michael's death in 2009. While the world mourned, Prince said nothing. No public tribute, no performance, no statement, just silence. For a man who often commented on peers and protégés, this absence was deafening. Fans wondered, was he too grief-stricken, or was the relationship so personal that words would have betrayed secrets he vowed never to reveal? Chaka Khan's inclusion of Michael in her list reframes this silence. It suggests that their rivalry may have masked something far more intimate, an emotional bond Prince could never publicly acknowledge. Michael, too, lived with his own battles over identity and sexuality, burdened by an image of childlike innocence that conflicted with rumors swirling around him. If Prince represented freedom and defiance of labels, Michael symbolized constraint and secrecy. Together, their story becomes not just about rivalry, but about two men reflecting each other's hidden struggles. In the larger tapestry of Prince's life, Michael Jackson stands out as the ultimate contradiction, both enemy and mirror, obsession and secret. Their relationship, whatever its true nature, was never spoken of directly. And perhaps that is why it still fascinates. Because behind the glittering lights and the tabloid headlines lay a connection that neither superstar dared to put into words. James Ambrose Johnson Jr. Rick James and Prince are often remembered as enemies. James Ambrose Johnson Jr., the super freak funk master, was bold, brash, and already established when Prince burst onto the scene in the late 1970s. Their rivalry became legendary, two black men reinventing funk with flamboyant styles, competing for dominance on stage, in fashion, and in the bedroom. Yet Chaka Khan's claim that Rick James was one of the 8 gay singers secretly tied to Prince flips the narrative on its head. Was their animosity hiding something far more intimate? The evidence of tension was everywhere. Rick publicly mocked Prince, calling him arrogant and dismissive. Their feud escalated during shared tours, where Prince's quiet intensity clashed with Rick's loud, controlling energy. Vanity, one of Prince's protégés, became a flashpoint between them, with Rick furious that Prince had stolen her away. To outsiders, it looked like professional jealousy mixed with sexual competition. But insiders often remarked that the rivalry carried a heat that seemed unusually personal. Prince never shied away from challenging Rick on his own turf. Where Rick strutted in leather and chains, Prince appeared in lace and heels. Where Rick flaunted women, Prince surrounded himself with ambiguity. Their interviews, laced with catty remarks and one-upmanship, read less like industry banter and more like the sharp exchanges of ex-lovers. Fans and journalists alike noted the sexual tension that seemed to underlie their verbal battles. Chaka Khan's perspective adds weight to these suspicions. She observed that Prince's deepest bonds, whether with Andre Simone, Michael Jackson, or Rick James, were marked by obsession, rivalry, and intensity. In Rick's case, the fury may have been fueled by attraction, neither man dared admit. For two artists who built careers on sexual bravado, confessing intimacy with each other would have shattered the images they carefully constructed. Their music reflected this push and pull. Rick James's super freak celebrated excess, while Prince's controversy blurred boundaries of gender and desire. Each seemed to be responding to the other, battling not only for chart supremacy, but for cultural ownership of funk's future. When Prince rose to superstardom with Purple Rain, Rick's bitterness grew. Yet even in bitterness, his obsession with Prince was undeniable. He couldn't stop talking about him. What makes their connection so fascinating is how much it reveals about Prince's pattern. As with Michael Jackson, what looked like rivalry may have been obsession. As with Andre Simone, what looked like brotherhood may have been intimacy. Rick James fits into this web as the dangerous lover, the one who fought hardest against Prince, perhaps because he felt too much. By including Rick James among the 8 names, Chaka Khan forces us to reconsider the famous feud. Their story was not just funk's greatest battle, but potentially funk's greatest secret. Two men who clashed so fiercely on stage because off stage their bond was far more complicated than anyone dared to say. Morris Day. Morris Day was more than just a bandmate. To many, he was the living reflection of Prince's eccentric genius, molded into a stage persona that mirrored everything Prince wanted to project but couldn't always show directly. As the frontman of the time, a band created and controlled by Prince, Morris embodied funk flamboyance, sharp suits, slick dance moves, exaggerated confidence. But behind the curtain, the relationship between Prince and Morris Day was far more complex than a simple artist-protégé dynamic. From the beginning, Prince seemed captivated by Morris's presence. They had met as teenagers in Minneapolis, part of the same music scene that also birthed Andre Simone. By the late 1970s, Prince was the rising star, and he placed Morris in a position of unusual visibility, fronting a band that Prince himself wrote, arranged, and produced for. It was a kind of double-life, Prince in the shadows, pulling strings, Morris shining in the spotlight. Yet when they appeared together, especially on stage, something electric happened. Their chemistry was unmistakable. Concertgoers described their banter as playful, even flirtatious. They would trade jokes, mirror each other's poses, and engage in mock battles for dominance. What looked like entertainment often felt like a private language between two men who knew each other far too well. Prince, famously controlling of his image and his music, allowed Morris a kind of freedom few others enjoyed. He gave him lines, moments, even entire songs that spotlighted his personality, as if he wanted Morris to embody the parts of himself he couldn't reveal openly. Chaka Khan's inclusion of Morris Day among the 8 gay singers Prince secretly dated casts these performances in a new light. The on-stage chemistry suddenly reads less like scripted theater and more like intimacy disguised as funk drama. Their interactions carried a rhythm that audiences couldn't quite decode, too knowing, too synchronized to be merely rehearsed. But like many of Prince's closest relationships, this one was marked by rivalry as much as closeness. Morris often bristled under Prince's control. Though The Time became a successful act, Morris knew the band's success was tethered to Prince's vision. He wanted independence, and that desire sometimes erupted into arguments and walkouts. Their friendship wavered, but the bond never completely dissolved. They circled each other like magnets pulled together by history and chemistry, pushed apart by ego and ambition. Prince's need for Morris was telling. With André Simone, he had creative intimacy. With Michael Jackson, he had competitive obsession. With Rick James, he had fiery rivalry. But with Morris Day, Prince had a living alter ego, a man who could project his flamboyant sensuality in ways that let Prince keep his mystery intact. Their relationship symbolized the duality at Prince's core, craving exposure, yet hiding in plain sight. By naming Morris Day, Chaka Khan revealed what longtime fans had suspected, that their chemistry wasn't just good stagecraft. It was the spark of a deeper connection, one that blurred art rivalry and intimacy. Morris was more than a bandmate. He was Prince's mirror, reflecting both the persona and the secrets the Purple One fought so hard to conceal. George Clinton. George Clinton, the mastermind behind Parliament Funkadelic, was already a towering figure in music when Prince began carving out his own path. By the time Purple Rain hit theaters in 1984, Clinton had already transformed funk into a psychedelic universe of glitter wigs and cosmic philosophy. Where others saw funk as a groove, Clinton turned it into mythology. It was only natural then that Prince, an artist equally obsessed with bending rules and redefining identity, would find himself drawn to Clinton not only as a mentor, but as Chaka Khan revealed, one of the 8 gay singers he secretly dated. On the surface, their bond was artistic. Prince admired Clinton's ability to make funk more than music. He made it a culture, a lifestyle. Clinton, in turn, saw in Prince a new generation of rule breaker, someone unafraid to blur masculinity with femininity, to mix eroticism with spirituality. Their collaborations were charged with intensity. When Clinton and Prince shared a stage, the energy felt electric, unpredictable, as though their chemistry couldn't be contained within a simple jam session. But Chaka Khan's revelation reframes that chemistry. Clinton wasn't merely a mentor figure, he was part of Prince's pattern of gravitating toward men who defied conventional masculinity. Like Sylvester before him and Little Richard decades earlier, Clinton embraced flamboyance as power. He wore makeup, donned extravagant costumes, and turned gender fluidity into a weapon against conformity. Prince, who mastered the same tools in his own way, found in Clinton not just a musical ally, but a kindred spirit. There was also a philosophical connection. Clinton's P-Funk mythology imagined music as a higher power, a force that transcended earthly categories of race, gender, or sexuality. Prince was on a parallel journey. His lyrics often asked spiritual questions wrapped in erotic imagery, as if to say, sex and God were not opposites, but mirrors. Clinton's worldview validated Prince's own, giving him permission to live outside rigid definitions. Fans who witnessed their interactions often noted a kind of playful intimacy. Clinton praised Prince's fearlessness, while Prince repaid that admiration with loyalty and collaboration. For an artist as guarded as Prince, giving someone like Clinton that kind of access was significant. Chaka Khan's assertion that their bond crossed into romance makes sense in this light. It was not necessarily about lust, but about shared energy, 2 men orbiting the same vision of art, rebellion, and freedom. What sets George Clinton apart from the other names is that he represented a bridge between generations. Rick James embodied conflict. Michael Jackson embodied rivalry. André Simone embodied early intimacy, and Morris Day embodied performance. Clinton, however, embodied philosophy. He wasn't competing with Prince. He was guiding him, affirming him, expanding him. And if Chaka Khan was right, their connection was both cosmic and personal, rooted in admiration that blurred into something much deeper. George Clinton's presence in Prince's hidden list reveals not only a secret romance, but also a secret influence. He gave Prince permission to exist as himself, untamed, undefinable, and unapologetically fluid. Their connection was not just funk history. It was a meeting of two visionaries whose bond helped shape one of music's greatest enigmas. Larry Graham. Larry Graham, the pioneering bassist of Sly and the Family Stone and later frontman of Graham Central Station, was already an icon when he entered Prince's life. Known as the inventor of the slap bass technique, Graham shaped funk decades before Prince emerged. But their connection went beyond music. By the early 2000s, Prince had grown increasingly spiritual, and it was Larry Graham who guided him into the Jehovah's Witness faith. For most, Graham was seen as mentor and father figure. Yet, as Chaka Khan revealed, Prince's devotion to Graham suggests a connection far deeper than religious mentorship, placing Graham among the 8 gay singers she named as Prince's secret companions. Prince's relationship with Graham was marked by intensity. Friends recall Prince calling him daily, sometimes multiple times a day, seeking counsel not only on faith, but on personal choices, business moves, and even relationships. For a man as famously independent and controlling as Prince, this level of reliance was unusual. He would restructure entire schedules to align with Graham's availability, travel to follow his guidance, and even adjust performances to fit around their conversations. To some, it looked like spiritual discipline. To others, it looked like emotional submission. Chaka Khan's framing casts this dynamic in a new light. She suggested that what the public saw as spiritual mentorship may also have carried undertones of intimacy. Prince had always gravitated toward powerful, charismatic men. Andre Simone in his youth, Michael Jackson as his rival, Rick James in conflict, Morris Day on stage, George Clinton in philosophy. With Graham, the attraction wasn't about competition or performance. It was about surrender. Prince, who rarely allowed anyone to control him, seemed willing to place himself in Graham's hands. This devotion raised questions that extended beyond faith. In interviews, Prince often deflected when asked about relationships, preferring to maintain his mystique. Yet his visible closeness with Graham became impossible to ignore. They were often photographed together, attending events side by side, speaking in ways that suggested a private shorthand. Graham's wife Tina was present in many of these moments, but the sheer emotional intensity between Prince and Larry stood apart. Musically, their bond was also significant. Graham's slap bass, which revolutionized funk in the 1970s, found echoes in Prince's own bass-driven grooves. On stage, when Graham appeared with him, there was a reverence in how Prince deferred to him unusual for a man who normally demanded center stage. It was as if Prince needed Graham's approval, not just spiritually but personally, an approval that grounded him even as it consumed him. Chaka Khan's decision to include Larry Graham on her list of 8 Forces fans to reconsider this relationship. Was it purely spiritual? Was it mentorship that crossed boundaries into something more? Or was it another example of Prince seeking intimacy with men who embodied power he both admired and desired? Whatever the truth, Graham represented a unique chapter in Prince's hidden life, the mentor who became in many ways the master of his heart. Adrian Nicholas Matthews Thaws. Among the 8 names Chaka Khan revealed, Tricky is perhaps the most surprising. Born Adrian Nicholas Matthews Thaws in Bristol, England. Tricky rose to fame in the 1990s as one of the founders of trip-hop, blending hip-hop beats with haunting vocals and experimental soundscapes. His reputation was that of an outsider, dark, unpredictable, resistant to mainstream expectations. In many ways, he was the European echo of what Prince had always embodied, an artist unwilling to fit into boxes of genre, gender, or identity. Stories of Prince and Tricky's connection surfaced in the 1990s, long after Prince had conquered the world with Purple Rain and rebranded himself as the artist formerly known as Prince. Tricky, riding the wave of his Mercury Prize-nominated debut, Maxinque 1995, was already being hailed as a voice of rebellion in the UK music scene. According to persistent rumors, the two met during studio sessions in London. The accounts are vague, almost mythic, a late-night jam, strange energy in the room, conversations that spilled into the early hours. Nothing concrete was ever documented, but those who were there swore something unusual passed between them. Chaka Khan's revelation that Tricky was one of the men in Prince's secret life gave those rumors new weight. What united them was more than music. Both men challenged conventional masculinity with their androgynous presentation and willingness to embrace vulnerability. Prince blurred gender through lace makeup and falsetto. Tricky blurred it through whispery vocals, eerie performance style, and collaborations that subverted expectations of dominance. To Prince, who gravitated toward men who embodied fluidity and rebellion, Tricky must have felt like a spiritual twin. One of Tricky's most quoted remarks about Prince deepens the intrigue. Prince was the only man who made being feminine seem powerful. For fans, this line became almost a confession, hinting at an admiration that was more than professional. Whether or not their bond crossed into romance, the comment alone suggests a depth of feeling uncommon between two musicians who met only briefly. Prince's pattern with other men: Andre Simone, Michael Jackson, Rick, James Morris Day, George Clinton, Larry Graham was built on long history. Tricky stands apart because his connection was fleeting yet profound. If Andre represented beginnings and Graham represented mentorship, Tricky represented the mysterious encounter, the kind of brief but electrifying connection that lingers in memory for decades. For Prince, who carefully curated his public image, even a short-lived connection carried risk. He rarely allowed outsiders into his inner world, yet with Tricky, the stories suggest he let his guard down, if only for a night, a session, or a conversation. That alone places Tricky in rare company. Chaka Khan's decision to include Tricky among the 8 is a reminder that Prince's secret life wasn't confined to Minneapolis or Los Angeles. It was global, spanning genres, borders, and generations. With Tricky, Prince found a man whose artistry reflected his own, a rebel, a mystery, an enigma. Their rumored bond may have been brief, but it captures perfectly the hidden truth Chaka unveiled. Prince's genius was shaped by men as unconventional and untamable as himself. William Everett Preston. Billy Preston, often called the fifth Beatle for his legendary keyboard contributions to the Beatles' Let It Be. Sessions was a trailblazer long before Prince became a household name. Born William Everett Preston in Houston, Texas, and raised in Los Angeles, he was a child prodigy who played with gospel icons like Mahalia Jackson before his teenage years. By the 1970s, he was one of the few openly gay black musicians in the industry, a bold reality that made him both admired and marginalized. When Chaka Khan named him among the 8 gay singers Prince secretly dated, the revelation felt both shocking and strangely fitting. Preston's career and life carried themes that resonated with Prince. Both men blurred boundaries: Preston with his gospel-infused funk and fearless stage energy, Prince with his genre-bending artistry and androgynous persona. For Prince, who spent his entire career dodging questions about sexuality, Preston represented what he could never publicly be: openly queer in a world that was not ready to accept it. Rumors of their connection trace back to Minneapolis's early days when Preston crossed paths with the young prodigy who would become Prince. The details are hazy, filtered through studio whispers and musician gossip, but they tell of jam sessions that spilled into private conversations, moments of mentorship, and a chemistry that was hard to ignore. For Prince, then still shaping his identity, Preston may have been both a guide and a temptation, the embodiment of possibility in a hostile industry. Chaka Khan's decision to include Preston on her list underscores how important he may have been in Prince's hidden emotional life. Unlike Andre Simone, who symbolized Prince's beginnings, or Michael Jackson, who embodied rivalry, Preston represented proof. He had lived openly as a gay black musician at a time when doing so carried enormous risk. Though Preston faced discrimination rumors and career struggles, he never denied who he was. Prince, who hid behind silence and mystery, may have seen in Preston a model of honesty he himself couldn't embrace. Their musical overlap, too, carried weight. Preston's gospel roots mirrored Prince's lifelong obsession with spirituality, while his funk style helped pave the road Prince later traveled. Both saw music not as entertainment but as divine communication. Their shared belief in music as transcendence bound them in ways words could not. What makes Preston's place on Chaka Khan's list particularly poignant is the contrast between his openness and Prince's secrecy. Preston, though scarred by the industry's prejudice, lived authentically. Prince, despite projecting androgyny and ambiguity, never admitted his truth. Their rumored connection symbolizes this tension, a meeting between a man who dared to live visibly and one who chose to remain hidden. Billy Preston died in 2006, a decade before Prince. His loss silenced one of the few voices who might have spoken openly about their bond. By naming him, Chaka Khan gave Preston his place in Prince's hidden history, reminding the world that even the Purple One's most carefully guarded secrets were tied to men brave enough to live outside the lines. Sylvester Stewart. Long before Prince Rogers Nelson became the Purple One, Sylvester Stewart, better known as Sly Stone, was tearing down musical barriers with Sly and the Family Stone. By the late 1960s and early 70s, Sly had already revolutionized funk, soul, and rock with his integrated band, psychedelic stagecraft, and fearless political edge. His unapologetic embrace of excess flamboyance and genre fusion made him both a trailblazer and a cautionary tale. And as Chaka Khan later revealed, Sly wasn't just an influence on Prince, he was also part of the fabric of secrets and coded relationships surrounding him. The most telling clue came in a small but revealing anecdote. When Prince first reached out to Chaka Khan in the early 1980s, he disguised his voice on the phone to sound exactly like Sly Stone. To Chaka, who was close to Sly at the time, the imitation was so uncanny that she believed it was really him. Prince's choice to borrow Sly's voice was no accident. It was a signal he had studied Sly not only musically, but personally, internalizing the cadent swagger and allure of a man who had long, blurred lines between genius and chaos. For Prince, Sly was both blueprint and warning. Musically, he took Sly's innovations, integrated bands, merging rock guitars with funk bass, layering gospel harmonies over psychedelic grooves, and built them into the Minneapolis sound. Personally, he seemed fascinated by Sly's androgyny, wild stage outfits, and openness to bending gender norms. Where Sly strutted in fur and sequins, Prince pushed the look further with lace heels and eyeliner. Both men used style as performance, as rebellion, and as a shield. Chaka Khan's framing of Prince's relationships with men like Andre Simone, Michael Jackson, Rick James, and others casts Sly's role in a new light. Though she didn't list him among the 8 Prince's mimicry, suggests he held Sly in a deeply personal place. In many ways, Sly was the archetype of the kind of men Prince gravitated toward: powerful, unconventional, fluid in presentation, and magnetic in energy. If Billy Preston embodied honesty and George Clinton embodied philosophy, Sly embodied the spark, the wild funk energy that Prince carried forward into his own era. By the 1980s, Sly Stone's career was unraveling under the weight of addiction and industry pressure. Prince, at the height of Purple Rain, stood as both heir and contrast, a man who took Sly's template and perfected it carefully, controlling his image while hiding his private truths. Their lives ran parallel, but never too far apart. When Prince borrowed Sly's voice to reach Chaka, it was almost symbolic. Sly was the mask Prince wore when he didn't yet know how to show his own vulnerabilities. In the grand puzzle of Prince's secret life, Sylvester Stewart represents the unspoken influence, the ghost in the background. He may not have been one of the 8 lovers Chaka named, but he was the mold from which many of Prince's deepest connections were cast. Without Sly Stone, there might never have been a Prince. Sylvester James Jr. Sylvester James Jr., known universally as Sylvester, was a singular voice in disco history. With his soaring falsetto, unapologetic queerness, and glitter-soaked stage presence, he challenged the music industry long before it was ready to embrace gender fluidity and same-sex love. Dubbed the Queen of Disco, Sylvester turned songs like You Make Me Feel Mighty Real into anthems of liberation, giving queer audiences a soundtrack for visibility during an era of silence. For Prince, who spent much of his life crafting mystery around his sexuality, Sylvester represented both inspiration and a possibility he himself never dared to live openly. The parallels between Sylvester and Prince are impossible to ignore. Both men embraced androgyny, blending masculine and feminine aesthetics in ways that unsettled audiences and thrilled fans. Both leaned on falsetto vocals to convey sensuality, transforming vulnerability into power. And both turned the stage into a theater of fluid identity, high heels, makeup, flamboyant costumes. Where Sylvester strutted in sequined gowns, Prince performed in lace and thigh-high boots. They were cut from the same artistic cloth, even if they operated in different musical genres. Chaka Khan's framing of Prince's secret bonds with men like Andre Simone, Michael Jackson, Rick James, George Clinton, and Billy Preston makes Sylvester's symbolic role clearer. Though not officially on her list of 8, Sylvester embodied the type of male energy Prince consistently gravitated toward: bold, uncontainable, and unapologetically queer. In many ways, Sylvester walked so Prince could run. He normalized a vision of black male performance that didn't fit macho stereotypes, opening the door for Prince to experiment safely within ambiguity rather than open declaration. Prince himself never publicly acknowledged Sylvester as an influence, but his choices echo Sylvester's legacy. Fans and historians often note how Prince's controversy era, with its mix of religious questions and sexual provocation, looked like a funk rock version of Sylvester's disco ethos. Both artists turned the confusion of public speculation into fuel, using whispers about their sexuality not as setbacks, but as mystique. Where Sylvester differed was in courage. He lived openly as a gay man, a rarity for a black artist in the 1970s. He refused to hide his lovers, his flamboyance, or his activism, even during the AIDS crisis that ultimately claimed his life in 1988. Prince, by contrast, guarded his secrets fiercely, cultivating intimacy with men in private, but never admitting it publicly. Sylvester's authenticity revealed the path Prince could not take to be both genius and openly queer. In the wider narrative of Prince's hidden relationships, Sylvester stands as the reflection Prince may have seen, but couldn't embrace. Chaka Khan's revelations about the 8 men show how much Prince craved intimacy with those who defied rules. Sylvester embodied that defiance, living loudly in ways Prince only hinted at. Though their worlds rarely overlapped directly, Sylvester's shadow lingers over Prince's story. He was proof that a black gay man could own the stage unapologetically. And perhaps in the privacy of Paisley Park, Prince carried a quiet admiration for the man who made being mighty real a reality long before the world was ready. Richard Wayne Penniman. Long before Prince blurred the lines between masculine and feminine with lace eyeliner and high heels, there was Richard Wayne Penniman, Little Richard, the flamboyant architect of rock and roll. Born in 1932 in Macon, Georgia, Little Richard turned gospel exuberance into wild rock energy, pioneering hits like Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally. But his contribution wasn't just musical. He injected queerness into mainstream culture decades before it had language for such visibility. With pompadour hair, sequined suits, heavy makeup, and an unapologetic persona, Little Richard lived as a contradiction, both preacher and provocateur, both closeted and outspoken. For Prince, Little Richard wasn't simply an influence, he was proof of concept. The very idea that a black man could wear eyeliner, strut in feminine clothes, and still command global attention was Richard's gift to the generations that followed. Prince took that template and made it his own, doubling down on ambiguity and using it as a shield. He could sing about God and sex in the same breath, perform shirtless in lace pants, and keep audiences guessing about his private life. Chaka Khan's revelation that Prince secretly dated 8 men, Andre Simone, Michael Jackson, Rick James Morris, Day, George Clinton, Larry Graham Trickey, and Billy Preston, casts Little Richard's place in this narrative as symbolic. While not on her list, Richard was one of the first to publicly praise Prince for embracing gender fluidity. He recognized in Prince a continuation of his own fight against rigid norms. Their mutual admiration hinted at more than respect. It suggested recognition. Both men used flamboyance as armor, projecting confidence while concealing vulnerability. Fans often note how Prince's 1980s image, the bouffant hair, eyeliner, androgynous fashion, felt like a modern reincarnation of Little Richard's 1950s look, where Richard shocked conservative audiences by singing Tutti Frutti with coded gay slang. Prince shocked MTV-era fans by performing openly sexual lyrics while refusing to declare his orientation. In both cases, silence and spectacle fed the mystery. The contrast lies in how they navigated their truths. Little Richard lived in constant tension at times, proclaiming himself gay, then renouncing it under religious pressure. His later years were marked by public struggles between faith and sexuality. Prince, by comparison, perfected ambiguity. He never confirmed rumors, never denied them, and turned silence into mystique. Yet Chaka's revelations suggest that behind closed doors, Prince may have lived closer to Richard's path than he dared admit. Together they form a lineage of resistance. Richard cracked the door open in the 1950s. Sylvester walked through it in the 1970s, and Prince carried it into the global spotlight in the 1980s and beyond. Each blurred gender and sexuality using performance to test what audiences were ready to see. In the grand puzzle of Prince's secret life, Little Richard stands as the origin point, the flamboyant pioneer who showed Prince it was possible to live in contradiction, to dazzle the world while hiding private truths. Without Richard Wayne Penniman, there may have been no blueprint for Prince's Purple Revolution. Prince's story remains one of the greatest enigmas in music history. Chaka Khan's bold revelation about the 8 gay singers he secretly loved forces us to question everything we thought we knew about the Purple One. Were these relationships hidden romances, or were they simply misunderstood bonds shaped by genius and secrecy? The truth may never be known, but one thing is certain. Prince thrived on mystery, and perhaps that was his greatest performance of all. What do you think, were these whispers of love real, or just another layer of Prince's carefully crafted legend?